Zoning administrator and travel and tourism head for Henry County. Probably not unlike a lot of you that have a lot of hats to wear. Two of those often seem a little bit contradictory. When I do economic development, I feel a little bit like a siren or something. I'm saying, come here, come here, come here, and then I put on my planning and zoning hat and I say, no, go away, go away, go away. So it's an interesting role to have to play, but it's not uncommon, especially for some of our rural counties, to have those dual responsibilities. I'm going to talk today about energy development. This is kind of a focus in, I don't know that it affects every county, but I think it affects counties sometimes more than they think. We're a little bit unique because of the impact it has on our particular county. We have two active big coal-fired power plants. We generate most of the power for the state of Utah through Rocky Mountain Power generated in Emory County from the Huntington and Hunter power plants. Massive facilities that have been in place since the 70s. We still have 3 active coal mines. We have about a dozen others, either in closure or reclamation, but we still get to deal with those in our planning and zoning processes. We have a refinery. We actually have the first refinery that's been approved also in the United States in decades, was approved by our Planning and Zoning Commission and our county commission 2 weeks ago. That's going to be about 4 miles west of Green River. It's about a 15,000 barrel per day refinery project we've been working on for a fairly significant amount of time. It's about a $300 million project. Very, very important, very interesting project. Coal bed methane is another way to extract natural gas. We have significant amounts of that in our area. That's been a project that we've been dealing with since the early 90s. Traditional gas wells, oil wells, disposal wells were talked about a little bit before. Most of the extraction we have for oil and gas also requires a way to get rid of the water. There's really nowhere in Emory County you actually can drill and get good water. It's all going to be saltwater brine. So if they extract it really in any of the processes, they've got to find a way to dispose of it. Disposal wells are actually one of the biggest challenges that we've had in the past in dealing with zoning issues. We have uranium mining in the county. We still have an active uranium mine, actually just permitted one about a year ago. Significant transmission lines, gas, electric. We actually have a national energy corridor that passes through Emory County, through Green River along Highway 6 into Carbon County, so we get to deal with the ramifications of that. Having those large power plants, we have large transmission lines that we deal with there. Having the coal bed methane and those kinds of products, we get to deal with how we get those big pipelines out to market. Increasingly, we're seeing interest in renewable energy projects. That's something we're still, frankly, trying to get our arms around. How do you deal with some of those? Because those may be something that deals with an existing facility, like a spring development or an irrigation project. Putting in some kind of turbines as far as that goes, to a solar project, to methane from landfills. All of those are a little bit unknown. And so we're still kind of feeling our way about those. Another one I want to mention, though, is you have related industries. You have things like transportation. We have a huge trucking component in Emory County. If you've ever driven through Farron, we average a coal truck through the city of Farron every 1 minute 47 seconds on a 24-hour basis. So, zoom, 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 and that's what you hear. And that, ebbs and flows during the day. They actually have agreements that they'll try and cut that traffic down during school, hours and bus times, but the bottom line is that's a big issue we have to deal with. And in the case of those particular trucks, they're not in our county. They're passing through our county. Actually, those mines are in Sevier County. It's the Sufco mine, but they're transporting the coal to the power plant in Hunter. And so complicated. How do you manage that when that extraction's not even occurring in our county? We have a CO2 resource, we have a helium resource, we have clay, gypsum, so all those are kind of related. So, I wouldn't say I'm an expert. I'm not sure there's very many counties that have that wide of a list that we do. How many in here have extraction kinds of industries or energy industries in their counties? Go ahead and raise your hands high. I'm pretty blind. So not everybody, but like I say, I think with that list, you might be able to see that you might have more than you might think you do. We're also a little bit unique. 92% of our land in Emory County is either federally or state-owned. So we're only have 8% private property in the county to generate tax income from and all those things. But as you can imagine, because of the energy resource, we have a lot of impacts that occur on that 92% that we have to manage and mitigate. We have hundreds of coal mines, copper mines, uranium mines all over the county. I know that just this coming summer alone, the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining and BLM will be closing or putting small closures and grates on about 170 uranium mines just in Emory County alone. So people don't realize how many of these kinds of activities were there historically. Dozens of family coal mines. My family owned a coal mine. It's actually the current mine where the miner that was killed a couple of weeks ago. That used to be our family mine. Virtually everybody in the county had a family mine. It may have only gone in a couple hundred feet, but that was the history of the way things worked. And at that time, there was no zoning for those things. You just basically went up, you saw coal, and you started digging. And it wasn't until 1970 that we actually even had a zoning ordinance, and that really was precipitated by the announcement of the Huntington Power Plant. Up until that time, it was kind of Old West. You kind of put stuff where you wanted, and you did it how you wanted, and that's the way it worked. We actually call, if you've been to the San Rafael, and we like to recreate out there, but the reason there's such a good transportation network, we actually call it, people back then used to do what we call recreational bulldozing. If you had a bulldozer and a Geiger counter, you just get on that thing and you go till that thing started clicking and you put in the uranium mine. But as a result, we have actually a pretty good network of county roads that received use, and that's actually why people get to enjoy the San Rafael Swell today. So we went through a number of revisions, particularly in 92 through 98 because of coal bed methane. One of the things we did is we went down and we're very careful to always look at what do we not want to have happen. So we look for places where these things are causing problems. We actually took a big field trip, went down to Montrose, Cortez, Colorado, northern New Mexico, where the coal bed methane industry first started, took our whole planning and zoning commission, took the county commission, and basically said, we don't want this, which was things like gas wells in schoolyards, inadequate spacing, and said, now that we've looked at what we don't want, we're going to come back and spend the next, in this case, 6 years regulating, putting in a plan so that that didn't happen as that was developed in our county. We started in 2004 implementing a lot more in the public lands arena. Up until that time, our general plan was like most general plans. It was just kind of a vision document. They actually bragged at one point, it was the Council of 100 that put that together. That's not a good way to do things, because everybody wants to pat each other on the back. And as we went through this last revision, we had to take out hundreds of pages of basically people saying, man, those guys over here were sure wonderful, and boy, I was wonderful for helping, and that's not a general plan. We had to clean a lot of that up. And then Land Use Authority, we went through what's called a resource management plan with the BLM and had to basically make sure that as BLM agencies, and that's actually continued from 2008 to now, federal land management agencies have a federal obligation to consult with the local planning process when they do a NEPA document. So if they're doing a study on something, building a road, a coal mine, protecting a cactus or a bird, they have to consult with our plans. We've discovered one of the best tools we have is have a very strong general plan when it comes to federal land use policies, a very specific plan. So we now have a very small core component of a general plan with massive appendices that deal with federal ground, that get right down to very specific geography and specific ways we believe those lands should be managed. Here's some of the challenges. I think these are fairly obvious. They have a big impact, but they don't generate a lot of traditional tax dollars. Gas and oil wells, for example, have a sliding scale, basically. It's not as directly tied to how much that well produces as to when it was installed. And that scale slides down over time, even though the impact may even increase. So you have to mitigate it. You get some mineral lease revenue, but that typically goes to the special service districts and not directly to the county. So the county has to be really careful how they deal with it. Another big issue we've dealt with is declining employment with higher production. My dad worked at the Deer Creek mine in 1981, 82. That time there was about 2,000 employees at Deer Creek. Deer Creek's still in operation today. Right now they have about 140 employees, and they mine 4 times as much coal as they did when Dad was there and had 2,000 employees. It's all technology based. They can use continuous miners, there's better ways to haul it, there's better ways to do it. It's also changed because the mines are so big. To get into the face where they work in Deer Creek now is 14 miles underground. From the time you leave daylight till you get to where you work, you're 14 miles underground. About 50 minutes to get there, driving in the dark. It's all changed. One of the other challenges we dealt with was how do you get the motivation of those people to work with you, especially if it's on federal or CITLA land. You know, they're saying, well, hey, I've got my approval from DOGM and the BLM, I don't have to talk to you. I don't have to even visit with you. We don't care. That's been a real challenge for us. The other thing, that big list I showed you a few minutes ago, that's a long list. I can't be an expert in all those arenas. I like to think I am, but I'm not a uranium and an oil and a gas and a mining expert. I try to familiarize myself as much as I can, but it's difficult to say that I'm an expert in all those areas. And it's an increasing challenge just to be conversational with all of those people, because that's what, at least the expectation they have, is you can be conversational with them. Another issue we've had is the energy extraction can conflict. Emory County, as you know, has got some beautiful vistas, the Santa Fe swell, those kinds of things. Another issue we have is because we don't have springs, our watershed is incredibly important to us. Our water virtually all comes off of the Wasatch Plateau, Skyline Drive. We've made strategic decisions that that's the number one priority. So when it comes down to it, it's in our general plan. When it comes to conflicts between two uses, watershed comes first. If there's a conflict that says, hey, we have an energy development project and we have a watershed issue with that, watershed's going to come first. But that's been a conscious, public, open discussion and dialogue to make sure that we understand that. And so the regulatory agencies understand that, the coal mines understand that. As a result, we've received incredible participation from the coal mining companies and the oil and gas companies. Basically, they've contributed millions of dollars to help us mitigate watershed issues. I sit on the board of directors of a special service district. We only have 400 customers, but we have 400 miles of line. So we literally have one customer per mile. Rocky Mountain Power, Pacific Corp, has actually provided us about $2.5 million of assistance because of coal mining activities near where our springs are. So this little company that can't generate even $100,000 a year in revenue has actually been able to access multi-million dollars in revenue through partnerships with the power company, because they understand the county's position when it comes to extraction of minerals versus watershed. So that relationship's been very good. And then roads. You can't get to any of these things without a road. So we utilize that road access as a very important tool for us to be able to manage these kinds of projects. As I mentioned before, the general plan is really important because BLM, Forest Service have no choice but to consult with that general plan. If it's not there, they can just check it off and say, there's nothing in the county document that we have to consider, so we're going to just pass right by it. But if we have very specific information and we've done our job and then actually really addressed a specific issue, they're obligated by litigation and by their own rules to basically follow that and to consult with us. We've also, yes?
With you mentioned you did specific by site. How do you do it by a small geographic region, or by? We broke it into multiple geographic regions, maybe a dozen or so, and then we literally went almost acre by acre, and we created a document that we went through on the BLM that literally goes through what are the historic uses of that, what are the historic mining uses, what are the historic grazing uses. Basically put together a chapter for each of those geographic regions within the county. So what kind of size did you do each one? Did you let the geography?
The geography, historic use was actually the thing that determined the size. It was an area that had not seen a lot of historic activity. There was a very small segment. If you had an area that had a lot of historic mining, a lot of historic tourism, a lot of historic grazing, some of those chapters might be 100 pages of photos and maps and diagrams of where we were really concerned about historic activity. You know, if we had an area, those who might be familiar, down by Goblin Valley, Temple Mountain, there's a lot of things that have gone back. You got Madame Curie was there in the 1890s, and you had uranium mining, you had grazing, and you've got now tourism, and you've got the state park. That includes all those current activities, so that if BLM is considering doing anything in that area, they can't ignore any of those issues that we've had occur in that property over time.
As you put that together, how much coordination did you do with BLM?
We coordinated with them a lot because we actually did that as we were doing their resource management plan. So they do their planning process. We consulted as a cooperating agent with them, and so at the conclusion of their process, we had concluded a process.
How did you address the WMA?
The wilderness areas we addressed, so we have wilderness study areas in our particular case, and we addressed basically identifying, once again, the historic uses, because we don't necessarily agree with all of the wilderness study areas, So we documented the historic uses, in particular uranium mining and extraction activities, as well as grazing.
So with your general plan, did you say we don't agree that should be a WSA?
We identify, not in all cases, in some cases we do, in some cases we recognize that recreation is the highest use, or protection is the highest use. I mean, that's one other thing we've recognized over time is that it's not all about energy. Sometimes recreation is higher. We're in a really unique situation too. On one side to our east, we have Moab and Grand Canyon, which is very recreational focused, which we understand. North of us, we have Uinta and Duchesne counties, which is energy extraction focused. And we sit between the two. We can't be all in on either one of them. We really have to kind of dance the line between those different uses. So it's a coordination process that we go through.
Did you shrink or expand any of those WSAs?
No. We just provided the information, so they have to consider that as they go through their process. He's just asking how our consultation was. And we don't try to change their management. It's their land.
Right.
We just try to provide them information so they understand how we would like to see that land managed.
I just wondered if you tried to say, yeah, we recognize we need to protect this, but rather than 100,000, we only do 50.
We haven't done anything like that through zoning. The county has another process they've looked at to do that. It just addresses what we prefer to see as activities based on historic uses. Our zoning strategies, I will identify a couple of important things, and some of these may be a little controversial. Number one, we have a very large mining, grazing, and recreation zone. So most of the county actually, these kind of extraction uses fit very well because they fit within what would be a zone that's very attractive to that. Mining, grazing, recreation covers coal mining, oil, gas, grazing, just kind of the typical extraction types of uses. It basically constitutes everything outside of what is served by the canals. Our ag zone basically is determined by where our canals go. And then all of that beautiful blue main coast that you drive through when you're going through there is this zone. And then we have a mountain zone which is right on the top of the skyline in that area. Emory County does not have in the unincorporated part a residential zone. We don't have one. It doesn't exist. We have 4 zones, but what we have is residential uses are one of the conditional uses that you can do out in some of these other zones, such as the ag zone. So we only have 4 permitted uses in the unincorporated parts of the county. That's all. The rest actually we go through some form of conditional use permit. What that allows us to do is that a house owner or a guy who ends up building his house next to a guy's feedlot doesn't end up with some kind of a standing, or we don't go through a lot of those fights because they're a conditional use next to a permitted use. We've been able to avoid significant amounts of problems by even establishing residential permits as a conditional use. I don't think that works for everybody, but part of the methodology then has also been to get people into the cities where those services and all those things can be. We have no problem with people building out in the county, but the standard is actually relatively high to be able to go out and locate kind of anywhere you want to be able to do those kinds of activities. And how that relates to energy development is that also that homeowner that wants to build and that gas well really has the same process. They have to go the same standard that they have to prove that it really fits that particular piece of property. It's worked very well for us. We are all in on conditional uses. As like I said, I don't think it works for everybody. We've drunk the Kool-Aid and we're all in. You know, it's our process. It works really well for us. So we have a very clear, very concise conditional use permit process. Neil has helped us, improve that over time, and it's worked really, really well for us. There's really very few, if any, processes or zoning applications we receive in the county that don't go just through a conditional use permit process. In our case, it's called a level 1, level 2, and level 3 conditional use permit. Level 1 is an administrative review by myself and my staff. Level 2 is the Planning and Zoning Commission. Level 3 is the County Commission. It's really clean. It's relatively clean, straightforward. Any one of the lower levels can automatically just forward any application they receive to a higher level. If they have any level of discomfort, they just escalate to the next level. And it works extremely well. So for an example in this, I actually have approval authority on gas and oil wells. So if anybody wants to drill a well, I'm not approval authority. If they want to tie those gas wells together with a network or with roads or with power lines, that now becomes a network, so it becomes a level 2 permit. If that gets to a point where it impacts the entire community or the county, it becomes a level 3 permit. So based on the amount of impact, if localized, regional, or countywide determines where that approval authority resides. Once again, that's worked very well. Another thing we've done is a staff review meeting. That's been very helpful. Every application that we get for these types of uses, we actually sit down with all of the staff and with the applicant and go through all the issues before we get very far at all. We do it on-site if possible, but you just go through every single issue that we potentially have: roads, engineering, dust, basically just kind of the way that the Department of Environmental Quality handles theirs. We just want to, if it's not your issue, you can get up from the meeting and leave. If you decide, hey, this isn't your issue, but it allows us to go through a process early on in the administrative review of that to determine if there's going to be things that happen. Road encroachment permit is really key because that's the leverage we have. If we have a project on federal ground and we have an operator in oil and gas that says, I don't want to play ball with you, there's really only two ways to get them to come, but the road encroachment's the big one. If we basically utilize that road encroachment and our road department says, you know, I'm not going to issue my road encroachment permit until we really have a feeling that you're in line with where you need to be with zoning, they come back to us and we are able to work through that. And so we have a really good relationship with them. Our road encroachment permit basically is a you break it, you fix it agreement. So we have a gypsum line, many of you have probably seen on the way to the Wedge, which is a very popular area in the Santa Fe Swell. That gypsum company essentially has 100% responsibility for that road between the Wedge Road and the highway. If there's a problem that occurs on that, too much dust shows up, or we get washboarding, that responsibility to fix that or pay the county to fix it resides 100% on that gypsum company. They accepted that responsibility at the time of permitting. So we don't have to fight it every time we have a problem with the road. We pull out the document, we make a phone call, the road is fixed the next day. Same thing with oil and gas companies. That road encroachment permit becomes our club because they know if they can't get on the county road to get to that project, they don't work today. It's been a very effective tool for us. Nuisance mitigation is always a concern that you've got, odors, those kinds of things. And we are, what we do now may not work for everybody, but it's basically the same concept. You break it, you fix it. We basically have a strong statement that we work with Neil in developing that allows us to basically say, any type of nuisance that you've got, we haven't gotten to that level of standard, but we're close, it falls 100% on them. And we've been able to work through that process very well. I think at some point we're going to have to strengthen that language, but it's actually worked very well on our nuisance language. Finally, just our keys to success. Communication is the most important thing. We communicate a lot with our applicants on these kinds of projects. I probably, on an individual oil or gas well, I'll probably do 2 or 3 site visits, and I'll probably have 15 to 20 phone conversations with the applicant. And most of those are initiated by me, not by them, because I need to know that information so that I can approve the permit process. So as I go through it, I want to know the information. I always do site visits. I'm not going to approve something I haven't seen. So I'm going to spend a fair amount of time on the ground, looking at the neighbors, looking at all those things. I'm going to do those even if it's a level 3 permit, because I'm going to be the one going up to the county commission providing that information to them. Our intent is to always approve an application at the most ease and at the lowest level possible. If we can push something down to a level 1 or an administrative level, that's our intent. We're not in a situation where our county is booming, so we frankly are trying to encourage this kind of growth. So we're frankly finding ways to make that as easy as we possibly can. The other way we're able to get companies who may be resistant is those other 2 items, liability and NEPA. The other reason we get a lot of compliance with our oil, gas, mining companies is if they have an accident, a fatality, an issue, who do you think one of the first people that's going to get called is? By the insurance company. It's going to be our office because they're looking for a way to not cover that accident. One of the easiest ways for an insurance company to avoid a claim is if they can document that that company was out of compliance or did not go through all the necessary steps with planning, zoning, administrative permit process. So we may have a well that's 20 miles from the town that's nowhere near anybody other impact. They'll still call me, get a permit because they don't want to have an injury request or workman's comp claim that company calls us and we tell them, no, we didn't ever hear from them. Claim denied. That's been one of our best tools to get them involved. And as I mentioned before, NEPA, because we consult with the BLM so closely, these companies know that, and even the BLM or DOGM or other agencies refer them to Emory County saying, we'd really like you to make sure that you're up to speed with Emory County's process before we finish your permit. Even though they don't have to do that, Doggett, for instance, is very good. Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining is very good to do that. We have good relationships with those entities. As I said, we actually meet on a regular basis, for instance, with the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining. We meet with their quality. We meet with all of those groups so that they understand our process as well as possible. We like to have copies and utilize other agencies as much as we can in our process. So a part of our oil and gas permit application, for example, is a copy of their APD, their application to drill. I'm not the expert in how to drill that well, but I want in their file, in that public record, how they plan to do it. So that if we have an issue and they're out of compliance, I've got strength in my application that Tammy back in the back is going to keep so that we can just put, you said you were going to do this, but you're not. You're out of compliance. Even though that's not our document, it gives us something in the record that basically utilizes the tool as we work through these issues. And then finally, we believe that our approvals have to be incredibly fast. We are looking to help these companies. We really are. We're not looking for excuses not to do these. It doesn't always happen. We actually had a recent coal mine. The most recent one that opened was the Lila Canyon coal mine. It took 11 years. Not because of us, more because of lawsuits and other things on the outside, but we stuck with that process during the entire 11-year process for them to get permitted and open that coal mine. In most cases, we can process very few applications, even with a level 3 permit, take us longer than 6 weeks from start to finish. And so we think that's been being as responsive as we know how to be to those kinds of needs. We think the fact that we operate fast makes them comply with us more in the future. So I don't know if there's any questions. I want to turn the time over to the other speakers here so that they can make their presentation. But I just want to, like I say, because we deal with such a wide assortment of issues, we think we've developed a process. And then as we develop new process, we bring people like Neil in to help us codify that in our zoning ordinance. So if we find a trick or something from a conference like this, we work very aggressively if we can to implement that into our zoning ordinance. Any other questions? Not good. Either you were asleep or you got everything you needed to have. And I'll stay up here close so if you have questions during this presentation, you can grab me again. There you go.
Testing. Is that on?
Yeah.
Okay. Mike, that was great. First of all, I thought you were going to just end up by talking about, are you having people oppose your energy development?
Occasionally, but frankly, not very common for us.
Oh,
We're
wow.
an energy company, energy-based
Yeah.
counties.
Okay.
The little opposition we typically get is from neighboring counties, and I hate to say it this way, but I'll say, that's really interesting, but you don't have standing.
Yeah, you went that second. Okay.
Thank you for your information.
Then I guess what we're going to do, what Sevier County is going to do is show you the other side, the ugly side of this. Because, of course, we believe in energy development. It's good for us. You know, if we didn't have the coal mines, we wouldn't exist as a county. We now have oil wells and new ones going in. Well, we might have a power plant. And might is a big word for us because this has been probably a 2-decade ordeal that we've gone through with this power plant. And the reason it was important to us is it's a $600 million plant. So what that means is the power company had 600 million reasons to get their plant. 600 million reasons to hire attorneys, to sue us, to do everything. And so it became a very big deal in our county. We could not have survived litigation, I don't think, if we had screwed this up. So, first of all, what I want to do very beginning is you have handouts that I brought. Okay? Let me show you what's important and what's not. Just so when you go home, and I want you to write this on there. Like the first thing should be the planned unit development permit. That document is worth much more than its weight in gold. Okay, I can tell you that. Blood, sweat, tears, and lots of money went into that. We went to Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Colorado, and California to get this, okay? And then dozens of attorneys. That document you can take, use whatever you want. It's valuable. You don't want to lose it. The second thing I think in the packet will be our zoning ordinance. Is that true? Is that? Yeah, it's all stated together. Is that the next thing? Yes? Okay, that you do not want to copy. Okay? That is our PUD permit, or ordinance. Do not, write that right on. Do not copy this, okay? It's one of those things like Morgan County said on the website, don't use our ordinances.
Yeah.
We can tell you, don't use this ordinance. But we'll look at it in just a minute, and I'll tell you why it's important. And then the last handout should look like this. It should be like planning and zoning, and then a bunch of, keep going. It should be right at the back. Oh, it's the middle. After map? Yes, after the map. That is something we developed in Sevier County. That's probably okay to follow. You basically got that law in your training today, or over the last 2 days. And I will go over that real briefly. Okay, first of all, so we have this company coming in Sevier County, 90s. They filed to build a coal-fired power plant. They did almost no public relations work, slipped through the zone change, and then started on the permit. A small group began to organize. They actually created an entity, Sevier County Citizens for Clean Air. All right. And by the way, I have 3 here and 1 back there, Sevier County people. So there's plenty of people to ask questions to. We went through everything. We went through a zone change, which is the legislative action, and we went through the permit approval, which is the administrative, and we had all the battles to go along with it. For instance, we had an initiative. The folks in Sevier County got on the ballot and did an initiative to change the law, to change our ordinance for zoning, to keep out power plants. We did that. In fact, we had the distinction of being the first county to do an initiative after our legislature, in their infinite wisdom, thought that it would be good to take away that power, this voting power from the people. So the legislature takes away the initiative power. We have a petition for an initiative, and the developer then takes us to court saying, you can't put that on the ballot. The court says, you know, I don't agree with this, but the new law says you can't have this on the ballot. That goes up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court says that law is unconstitutional. You will put it on the ballot. It was on the ballot. It passed. And I just have to point this out because it's kind of like the only humor I can find in this whole thing. You don't have this, but this group, in their early organization, they didn't have a lot of legal help. So they do this initiative to change the zoning law to not allow power plants. This is how it reads. This is now law in Sevier County. Issuance of a conditional use permit for an electricity generating plant whose primary fuel source is coal shall require approval of a majority of registered voters within the county voting at a regularly scheduled election. Good, right? Okay, we'll vote on it. That's a conditional use permit. The little lady that did that, she didn't know it's a planned use development permit that the power plant was after. So she amended the wrong ordinance. But we went through that. Our county went through that entire thing, and you just, I can't tell you how difficult that was on the county. It just pulled the county apart. Husbands against sons, brothers against sisters and brothers, and it absolutely split the county. But in the end, we amended the wrong ordinance, but what it was a message vote, I think. I think it allowed, I've never heard the Rex Lee comment that Neil tells about, but it's absolutely true. People just want a chance to say something. They just want to be heard. You may disagree with them, your county commissioner, whoever may disagree, but they just want to be heard. In any case, we had to go through that as part of our process, and it was very difficult on the county. Let me point out, let's just go through this real quick, because this is really near and dear to our hearts. I just can't tell you how many, what has gone into this permit. Like I said, thousands of dollars of work. We hired the best land use attorneys in the state, and so did the other side. So it was really great to see the big names battling this out. The developers had their big guns, and we had our big guns, and I think we came to a good solution. Let me just mention one other thing about the attorneys. As a county attorney, I'm a prosecutor, basically, and so I've had to learn this the hard way, and get involved in this. What I learned is, in the political process, sometimes it helps to bring outside people. What I did is I requested, and the county commission graciously gave it to me, was hiring outside counsel to come in and tell them basically that I was telling them the truth. Because it got to the point where my own people would look at me and say, you know what, you're just for this power plant. We don't trust your legal advice. And of course that hurt. You know, I only care about the law. I really don't care what people think. It's what the law says. But we brought these guys in, and it really made a difference. Okay? It was money well spent. Mr. Lindbergh is gone. He is a hero for us. He came in, looked at the process, and said, you're right. You're doing things right. Let me back up just a little bit. Our PUD permit, the old one, used to require a zone change and then a permit. What you should have learned here is something that crucial, what we learned. Legislative versus administrative, right? The zone change was legislative. It happened very early in the process. What can you do with legislative acts? You can refer them, right, to the people. Well, that happened so early in the process that the people never got a vote on it. By the time the people got organized against the plant, we had already passed the legislative action. We were in administrative procedures. There is no referendum initiative voting on an administrative procedure, right? You've learned that? I can't tell you how important that is. The presenters have told you that's the first thing you should decide when you take an action. Absolutely it is. Because we had to go back and back and back and tell people, folks, we're way past that. We could have voted at the zone change, but that's over. That was over a decade ago. Okay? We went back and changed our PUD so that they kind of run together now. The zone change and the permit process now run together. So I think the public now can get involved early or late, but they can still get involved. So that's something that we changed. Okay, as far as this PUD permit, there's a couple things I wanted to point out. The very first part of it looks like just legal mumbo jumbo, right? What we did is we recited the whole tortuous procedure we went through in order to get all the parties to acknowledge that here's what we've done and everyone accepts it. If you have any problem with it, do it now. Okay? This PUD permit is actually a development agreement. So I'll tell you my development agreement story. Everyone told us we need to do a development agreement, okay? Because this is such a huge project, multi-year, multi-phase, millions and millions of dollars. You need to do a development agreement. Okay, we'll do it. But as we sat down and started going through it, we thought, we don't want to be on a contract with these people. I didn't want to enter into a contract with a $600 million gorilla. because I know what's gonna happen. They are gonna find a way that we breach the contract, and then they're gonna sue us, right? And a couple of things I mentioned, I picked up from, we converted our development agreement, and I'm actually glad that the attorneys aren't here, because I don't know if they would have agreed with this, but we did. We thought it was a good idea. We converted our development agreement to a permit. Why? It made it administrative, not a contract. It's an administrative procedure in our zoning ordinance. It's not a contract anymore. You can't sue me for breach of contract. Johnny has to cover us if anything goes wrong because it's a permit. It's no longer a contract, right? So there's no breach of contract. We believed it made it more enforceable. This development agreement, this permit is recorded. It's recorded on the property. It now runs with the land. Anyone who buys this, anyone who lends money on this property has to abide by this permit. We love that because we've always thought this is going to affect our kids, not us. It allowed, combining the two allowed us to do a lot of non-code conditions. Now you might say, why is that important? Here's why it's important. What I gave you are a copy of our ordinance to show you just how pathetic an ordinance can be. And I echo what they said. I'm going to go back to my planning commission and beg them to be planners and not administrators. Okay? We have an administrator. He does a good job. They should be planners. They should be working on this stuff every month. Get us a decent general plan. Get us some decent ordinances. But if you just thumb through our ordinance really quick, you'll see that there's maybe 24 conditions, right? Well, I just did some quick calculations, and this permit has 16 different sections and 70 different conditions. So we've either doubled or tripled how many conditions. Why is that important? Because every time a developer comes to you and you put a different condition on them, what do they say? Where in the code does it say that? If it's not in your code, we're not going to do it, and you can't make us. And if you don't like that answer, talk to our attorneys. That's exactly what they did. And they had this little firecracker attorney, and she would call me right on the phone and say, guess what your planning commission did now? You know, we'd go through it, and she'd say, if you don't show me where that is in your ordinance, we're not doing it. You're going to court. But because we sat down with them and said, let's do an agreement, let's put all this out on the table, they agreed to do this permit with us, and we went through condition after condition. And these folks spent, I don't know how many hours with experts going through all kinds of studies, highway studies, light studies, noise studies, and putting in conditions. So I think we were really successful. I do have to say one thing for the developer. They knew this project was huge. They knew they had to work with us on some things. And so they did come to the table and do a lot of this. You'll see at the second page, we have explicit language that says all of these conditions have to do with mitigation. Okay, critical. You can't just, like, we had the school district come to us and say, here's what we want. We want them to build us this school. And you know, we want a school. We don't want a new school for free. You know, we're willing to pay freebies. But we knew if it couldn't be linked to the plant, we weren't going to get it. So there's a lot of things in here that are not. There's a lot of things that aren't in here that we wanted. You know, people had all kinds of irrigation type requests. We want a new ditch up here. We want new diversion here. But it wasn't linked to the plant. So you're not going to get your wish list. But it's very. I thought it was a good idea to put in here that every one of these conditions has to do with mitigation of the impact your plant will put on our county. And you'll see that it's just page after page. The reason I think this is valuable to you is it's a punch list of stuff that any big development might have on your county. So I would use it. If you go to page 8, We included deadlines, and we talked about that yesterday. The way we did our deadlines is we pegged it to a different phase. Okay, so we didn't say you must have this built within 3 years, but we gave them different phases. You must start this phase, and you must do this phase. Because what we learned is there were all these other federal agencies and state agencies that had, approval authority over us. And so they could stop the process anytime. In fact, just to mention another part of the nightmare, power plants require air quality permits. The air quality permit on this plant has been in litigation for 2 decades and is still in litigation, because that's a good way to stop a plant, is to attack those other permits. So not only was Sevier County being attacked on our permit, but the air quality permit was being attacked. There was a wastewater or a waste permit for the ash or whatever. I mean, it was just everything was attacked. But that's what we did. We wanted there to be deadlines. I think there have to be deadlines, but we pegged them to phases and not just a calendar year. We also put in there, you'll see that the permit is subject to reconsideration and revocation. Now, the attorneys didn't think that was going to work, but we got it in. Because we said, look, there's a lot of things that could come up. We have to have the right to go back and look at this. I think it violates the whole vesting rights thing that the developer wants. But, hey, you don't get it if you don't ask, and we did. Taxes. Taxes is critical because it's money, right? This is all about money. We didn't write that. There's a guy up here on Foothill Boulevard in Salt Lake City. He wrote that. We hired him to do it. That's what I recommend you do. Don't try and do this stuff yourself. We had no idea what to do with that. And because we hired him, we have the potential to have the sales tax of every piece of material in that plant taxed in Sevier County. We had no idea that could happen, because sales tax is usually paid where it's purchased, but we have these turbines and all this special steel. It's taxed when it hits the ground in Sevier County. And we got that because we hired a tax expert, and he worked this out. And it's just, you're going to need help. I'm sorry. I wish we could do this stuff ourselves. You know, small counties are always good at doing stuff ourselves, but sometimes you just get over your head. Number 10. Or on page 10, number 1. I noticed that Neil Lindbergh said that exact paragraph right there. That might be his, so I'm going to give him credit. Don't limit your police powers. That was good. Page 11, number 8. Indemnification. We got them to indemnify us. And so it's going to be hard for them to come to us and say, hey, there was a procedural problem with this permit. It's now been voided by the Utah Supreme Court. You guys screwed up. You need to pay us. We're like, no. This is your project. I'll mention another thing there. Let's see. I can't remember exactly how it went, but when we had the lawsuit over the initiative vote, we were a party to that. We were sued, okay? We were sued to get this thing on the ballot. Well, Sevier County took the position that this isn't our project. This isn't our ballot, okay? We have 2 groups here that want to battle this out. You battle it out. You hired attorneys. You go into court. And they did, okay? And it worked. They go in, they battle it out. We were forced to kind of be there with the party, but the activist group and the developer actually ended up doing all the litigation and all the briefing on those cases because we just didn't have a dog in the fight. Okay? We don't care if we have something on the ballot. That's what counties do. We put things on ballots. We also don't care if there's a power plant. It would be nice, but if it doesn't come, we'll exist. We'll continue. So that's something we did as far as litigation. Page 12, a couple more things, and then I'm going to be done. Number 16, reclamation bond. I think you have to think about what's going to happen if they walk out midstream, or if they or 50 years down the road and they just leave the plant. What are you going to do with it? We put in a reclamation bond. Number 18, real covenant, it runs with the land. This is not a contract. And I can't tell you how good I feel about that. I will never be sued on this contract. I couldn't even imagine what that would be like. But this runs with the land. It's enforceable against all those people. 2 points. The thing after the map, those are things you've already heard in this training. Me and my folks had to learn this the hard way. And what this is my memo, it's condensed down. But this is the memo I wrote to my zoning commission. Because they looked at me and they said, why is this permit being forced down our throats? This was one of the hardest things we had to come to terms with. And it all has to do with the second page called Administrative Decisions. And if you read down through there, you will see the brutal truth we came to learn, that when it gets through the administrative procedure phase, the permit is coming, and you have to approve it, unless you can't mitigate all of its impacts, or there's a compelling countervailing public interest. And we have a lot of pressure on us to deny this permit. A lot. I know there are men and women that lost sleep, lost friends, some quit. We had people quit over this. And it just came, for me, and maybe it's because I'm a lawyer, it came down to the law. The law says, folks, you have to approve this. So get used to it. Start getting used to it. And you know what? When we explained this, these people came around and they said, all right, we will be the people to stand and take the heat, to do what's right, to do what the law says. And I couldn't have had a prouder day to be in Superior County, because they stood up and took that. And it was incredible. Right at the end of that page, impermissible factors, that's quoted language out of court cases. If you want to read that, that might help you one of these days when you're sitting on your commission and your friends and your neighbors, people that you trust and respect, are sitting there staring you down, calling you names, saying your business is done in your county. You're going to want that, okay? You're going to need that, because the law does protect you in what you do, and we learned it will protect us, but sometimes you just got to stand up and take the heat. Lastly, our coal-fired power plant is now a natural gas-fired power plant. That was the compromise that all of these people made to get it done, so that the pollution problem would be mitigated, and so we didn't have to fight a $600 million lawsuit. I don't know if that's good, but I felt like it was a compromise that we came together and we got it done. It's not built yet. They claim to have a buyer for the permit who will build it, and they claim to have all of the pipeline for the gas ready to go, except about 100 yards that the feds, of course, have thrown a wrench into it. That was quick. That I just summed up 12 years of my life. To put it, this will help you understand. I come from a very tiny county. I 500 felony filings a month or a year, and my guys, my fellow prosecutors, gave me an award just for this. That's how badly they felt for me. But you know, I'd do it again. I learned a lot. Are there questions? Okay, good.
Thank you, Dale.